Hello, I'm Reverend Karen Davis of First Christian Church. Back in 1994, the Reuters news agency ran a story about a young woman living in China who had found out that for all of her life, she had had a rusty pen stuck and lodged into her skull. For the 20 years of her young life, she had been having various pains in her arms and legs, difficulty at times and with movement, and perpetual headaches. The doctors had run all types of tests trying to figure out what was wrong. Finally, when they did a CAT scan of her brain, they found the rusty pen lodged in there. Apparently, shortly after birth, somehow this pen had gotten stuck into her skull and had continued to make its way into her head, causing this pain and difficulty. Once it was removed, the headaches were gone, and she began to regain some of that movement that she'd begun losing. What we find on a spiritual level is that negative thoughts can lodge into our brain, and they can begin to impact us, affect our lives, what we do, what we say, how we behave. And so in this week's scripture for reflection from Paul's letter to the church at Philippi, chapter 4, verses 1 through 9, he's encouraging the Philippians to think on that which is right and true and honorable and pure, those things that are uplifting. Because just as with the food we take into our body impacts the health of our physical body, so too the thoughts that enter into our head impact how we think, how we behave. And so Paul is encouraging his audience in Philippi, as well as we who read it today. It tells us to think on that which is good. It is so easy to have so many negative thoughts that we are bombarded with, whether it's on television, social media, whether it's with the people we find ourselves associating with at times. We can be bombarded with negative thoughts, and when we begin to fixate on those, then pretty soon that's what we spew out. We spew out that negativity. And so we are encouraged to focus on that which is good. Paul began with this exhortation to the Philippians back in chapter 3 of his letter. He was encouraging them to be reconciled to God and reconciled to one another. He knew that it was difficult for them to do that which was good and right and uplifting if they were focused on those things that brought them down spiritually and eventually had an impact on how they felt and how they interacted as a community. So he was encouraging them to take in good nutrition for their heart by thinking on those good things. Anything that was honorable and right and just and pure, think on those things. Because then they could find peace with God and peace with one another. He wanted them to work at being reconciled with each other, and that was difficult to find, that grace and forgiveness. It was difficult for them to show love to one another if they were filling themselves up with negative thoughts. So my encouragement to you this week is to read this passage, to focus on these words of Paul, to take in that which is good and right and just, so that what comes forth from you is also good and right and just and fair, so that you may be filled with the peace of God, and that you will share the peace of God with all whom you encounter. Join us this Sunday for Facebook Live as we continue to reflect on this passage and find those ways to take in what is good and to share what is good in the eyes of God. Go with God's blessings.